There is a loneliness that comes from being abandoned. And then there is a loneliness that arrives when you finally begin to see clearly. Most people spend their lives trying to escape the first. Very few ever understand the second. They fill every silence with noise, every empty room with distraction, every uncomfortable feeling with conversation, entertainment, movement, or ambition. Yet the more they run from loneliness, the more it follows them like a shadow stretching across the years. Marcus Aurelius understood something that few people ever discover. The greatest loneliness is not the absence of others. It is the absence of yourself. It is waking every morning surrounded by voices, yet unable to hear your own. It is spending decades performing for the approval of strangers, while never meeting the person hidden beneath the performance. It is reaching the end of a long life and realizing that everyone knew your mask, but no one including you ever knew your soul. The modern world fears solitude with a peculiar intensity. A moment alone has become almost unbearable. The instant silence appears, a hand reaches for a screen. The instant boredom emerges, another distraction arrives to smother it. The instant discomfort surfaces, attention races outward. Away from the self. Away from reflection. Away from truths. Because deep down, many people suspect something. They suspect that if they sat quietly for long enough, they would meet someone they have been avoiding for years. Themselves. Imagine standing beside a still lake before dawn. The water is perfectly calm. No wind. No movement. No disturbance. For the first time, the surface becomes a mirror. And suddenly, everything hidden becomes visible. Most people do not fear the darkness. They fear the reflection. They fear seeing how much of their life has been shaped by approval. How many decisions were made from fear. How many dreams were abandoned because someone else disapproved. How many years were sacrificed trying to become acceptable to people who were never truly paying attention. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. He commanded armies. He possessed influence beyond imagination. Yet again and again, in the private pages of his journal, he returned to the same lesson. Your peace cannot come from other people. Not because people are bad. Not because relationships lack value. But because every external thing is unstable. Praise changes. Affection changes. Opinions change. Crowds change. Even those who love you will someday leave or be taken by time. The Stoics understood that everything external exists on borrowed time. Everything. The admiration of others. Their approval of society. Their applause of the crowd. The security of possessions. The certainty of circumstances. All of it moves like clouds across the sky. And yet human beings continue trying to build permanent homes from temporary things. Then they wonder why their lives feel fragile. A person who depends on external validation lives like a sailor who anchors his ship to the waves. Every compliment lifts him. Every criticism crushes him. Every rejection wounds him. Every moment of neglect feels like death. He becomes a prisoner of forces he cannot control. His emotional weather belongs to strangers. His peace belongs to strangers. His identity belongs to strangers. His life belongs to strangers. And because of this, he is never truly free. Loneliness often begins the moment these illusions start to break. Perhaps friends disappear. Perhaps a relationship ends. Perhaps age slowly pulls away the people who once filled every corner of your days. Perhaps success arrives only to reveal its emptiness. Whatever the cause, there comes a moment when the noise fades. And there you are, standing alone. Many people see this as a tragedy. Marcus Aurelius saw something different. He saw an invitation. Because what if loneliness is not a punishment? What if it is an initiation? What if life occasionally removes the crowd so you can finally hear your own voice? The forest appears silent to those who do not listen. But anyone who has walked alone among ancient trees knows otherwise. There is a deeper conversation happening beneath the silence. The movement of leaves. The slow breathing of the earth. The distant song of unseen birds. The subtle rhythm of existence itself. Solitude works the same way. At first it feels empty. Then it feels uncomfortable. Then it feels frightening. And eventually, if you remain long enough, it begins to reveal things that noise could never teach. You begin to notice your thoughts. Not the thoughts borrowed from society. Not the opinions inherited from the crowd. Not the beliefs repeated by habit. Your thoughts, your fears, your desires, your contradictions, your wounds, your truth. This is why genuine self-knowledge is so rare. It requires stillness. And stillness requires courage. Because there is nowhere to hide. No audience to impress. No role to perform. No applause to pursue. Only the naked reality of who you are. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding this meeting. They become experts in distraction. Masters of avoidance. Collectors of noise. Yet beneath their activity remains an unspoken hunger. A hunger not for more stimulation, but for reunions. A reunion with the forgot self. The self that existed before fear taught it to shrink. Before approval taught it to perform. Before society taught it to compare. Before ambition taught it to chase. Marcus Aurelius understood that the human soul does not become strong through constant companionship. It becomes strong through learning that it can stand alone. Not isolated. Not bitter. Not detached from humanity. But rooted. A mountain does not reject the valley. It simply does not depend upon it. The mountain remains itself whether storms arrive or sunlight follows. Whether crowds gather at its base or no one notices its existence. Its strength comes from within. Human beings are meant to cultivate the same stability. To become people whose peace is not negotiated every morning with their opinions of others. To become people whose worth does not rise and fall with popularity. To become people who can sit quietly with themselves and feel no need to escape. This is not easy, especially as the years pass. Because age has a way of stripping illusions. Friends move away. Children grow independent. Careers lose their glamour. Bodies change. Certainties disappear. The world that once seemed solid begins revealing its impermanence. Many interpret this as loss. The Stoics saw revelation. For what is being removed was never truly yours. And what remains is what always mattered. Character, wisdom, presence, integrity, the soul itself. Everything else was scenery. And sooner or later, every traveler must continue the journey without the scenery he once mistook for home. There comes a strange moment in life when loneliness begins transforming into something else. Not because more people arrive. Not because circumstances improve. But because you stop fighting your own company. You stop treating solitude as an enemy. You stop measuring your value through constant attention. You stop demanding that others fill spaces they were never meant to fill. And in that moment, something remarkable happens. The loneliness that once felt like an empty room begins to feel like open sky. The open sky asks nothing from you. It does not demand performance. It does not require explanation. It does not care whether you are admired or forgot. It simply exists. And somewhere within that vastness, a person begins to discover a freedom that cannot be purchased, inherited, or granted by another human being. A freedom born from no longer needing to be constantly seen. This is one of the great paradoxes of life. The people who desperately seek attention rarely find peace. The people who make peace with being unseen often discover a quiet strength that attention can never provide. Marcus Aurelius knew this well. Every day he was surrounded by voices. Advisors, generals, politicians, petitioners, citizens. Every person wanted something. Every person had an opinion. Every person believed they knew what should happen next. Yet despite being surrounded by humanity, he continually returned inward. Not because he despised people, but because he understood a simple truth. If you do not retreat into yourself from time to time, the world will gradually replace your thoughts with its own. The crowd has a peculiar power. It slowly teaches you to forget who you are. Not through force, not through violence, but through repetition. You hear enough opinions and they begin to sound like facts. You absorb enough expectations and they begin to feel like obligations. You witness enough comparison, and eventually you start measuring your worth against people who are fighting battles you cannot see. A man spends years chasing status. A woman spends years chasing approval. Another spends decades trying to become someone else's definition of success. All the while the soul quietly waits. Patient, silent, unnoticed, like a forgot friend sitting in the corner of a room. Waiting for the day you finally turn around and ask, what do I actually want? Not what impresses others. Not what earns applause. Not what appears successful from a distance. What truly matters to me? The question sounds simple, yet it terrifies most people. Because honest answers require honest living. And honest living often demands change. It may require abandoning old identities, leaving behind familiar masks, walking away from expectations that no longer belong to you. This is why loneliness often appears before transformation. The caterpillar disappears before the butterfly emerges. Winter arrives before spring returns. The seed vanishes beneath the soil before life breaks through the surface. Nature never apologizes for these periods of isolation. It understands that growth often happens underground. Invisible, silent, alone, human beings are no different. Some of the most important chapters of your life will unfold in places where nobody applauds. Nobody notices. Nobody understands. There will be seasons when it feels as though the world has forgot you. Calls become less frequent. Invitations become rare. Relationships drift. The familiar noise fades into the distance. At first, this feels like rejection. Then it feels like emptiness. But eventually, another possibility emerges. Perhaps life is creating space. Space for reflection. Space for healing. Space for wisdom. Space for the person you are becoming. A tree does not grow stronger during calm weather. Its roots deepen when storms arrive. The winds that threat to uproot it force it to anchor itself more deeply into the earth. Likewise, loneliness often drives a person inward. And what begins as discomfort can become foundation. You start relying less on applause, less on reassurance, less on constant companionship. The emotional muscles that were once weak begin to strengthen. The need for validation begins to loosen its grip. The fear of being alone begins to dissolve. And gradually you discover something astonishing. The thing you feared was never solitude. The thing you feared was facing yourself. Because solitude itself is neutral. A quiet room is neither friend nor enemy. A silent evening is neither blessing nor curse. What transforms solitude into suffering is resistance. The constant belief that something is missing. The relentless feeling that this moment should be different. That someone should be here. That life should be louder. That happiness should depend upon another presence. Yet reality remains unmoved by these demands. The evening stays quiet. The room remains still. The silence waits. And if you stop resisting it, the silence begins teaching. It teaches patience. It teaches observation. It teaches acceptance. Most importantly, it teaches the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness says I am incomplete without others. Aloneness says I am whole whether others are present or absent. One comes from dependency. The other comes from inner sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius spent countless hours contemplating mortality. Not because he was morbid. Not because he enjoyed dark thoughts. But because he understood that awareness of death clarifies life. Nothing reveals the truth faster than remembering that everything ends. Every argument, every reputation, every insult, every praise, every possession, Every achievement, every body, every relationship, every empire, time eventually gathers them all. People spend enormous energy trying to avoid this reality. Yet the Stoics moved toward it. They looked directly at impermanence. And in doing so, they became less afraid. Think about the people whose opinions keep you awake at night. Imagine them 100 years from now. Gone. Imagine yourself 100 years from now. Gone. Imagine every argument that currently feels important. Every social status. Every rivalry. Every embarrassment. Gone. Time erases them with extraordinary indifference. What remains? Character remains. The quality of your actions remains. The courage you displayed remains. The wisdom you cultivated remains. The kindness you offered remains. Everything else fades like footprints on a shoreline. This realization changes loneliness. Because once you understand the temporary nature of all external things, you stop demanding permanence from them. You stop expecting people to stay forever. You stop expecting circumstances to remain unchanged. You stop treating impermanence as betrayal. You begin accepting it as nature. And acceptance creates peace. The river does not argue with the current. The moon does not resist its phases. The seasons do not protest their changes. Nature moves gracefully because it does not fight what cannot be avoided. Human suffering often begins where acceptance ends. A person clings to youth. A person clings to recognition. A person clings to relationships that have already changed. A person clings to versions of life that no longer exist. And every act of clinging creates tension. The tighter the grip, the deeper the pain. Marcus Aurelius understood that freedom comes through loosening the grip. Not through indifference. Not through emotional coldness. But through wisdom. The wisdom to love without possession. To appreciate without attachment. To participate without dependency. To care without becoming enslaved. This is difficult. Because the heart naturally wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants permanence. It wants promises that nothing will change. Yet life offers no such contract. The flower blooms because it will fade. The sunset becomes beautiful because it will disappear. A human life gains meaning because it is temporary. And perhaps relationships become precious for the very same reason. Not because they last forever, but because they do not. Once you understand this, solitude no longer feels like evidence that something is wrong. Instead, it becomes a reminder of something true. You arrived in this world alone. You will leave it alone. And between those two mysteries, your task is not to avoid solitude. Your task is to become worthy of your own company. To build an inner life so rich that silence becomes nourishment rather than punishment. To develop a character so grounded that external approval becomes pleasant but unnecessary. To cultivate a mind so disciplined that it remains steady amid both companionship and isolation. And when that happens, a remarkable transformation occurs. You stop seeking people to rescue you from yourself. You begin sharing yourself with others from a place of fullness. The difference changes everything. One relationship is built on need. The other is built on abundance. One says, complete me, the other says, walk beside me. One fears separation. The other appreciates connection without becoming dependent upon it. And only the second can truly endure. There is a certain stillness that arrives late in life. Not the stillness of exhaustion. Not the stillness of defeat. But the stillness of understanding. It comes quietly, almost unnoticed, like evening light gradually settling across an ancient landscape. For years, perhaps decades, a person struggles against reality. They fight circumstances. They fight aging. They fight disappointment. They fight their opinions of others. They fight the passage of time itself. And then one day something changes. Not in the world. In them. The battle begins to lose its appeal. The endless resistance starts to feel unnecessary. The soul grows tired of carrying burdens it was never meant to hold. And so it begins to set them down. One by ones. The need to be admired. Set down. The need to always be understood. Set down. The need to win every argument. Set down. The need to prove one's worth. Set down. The need to control what cannot be controlled. Set down. What remains is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. Because true strength is not measured by how much weight you can carry. It is measured by how much unnecessary weight you are willing to release. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every person lives inside a private world. Every mind carries its own fears, its own desires, its own memories, its own misunderstandings. People see reality through countless different lenses. And because of this, they will judge you according to stories that exist entirely within their own minds. Some will misunderstand your silence. Others will misunderstand your ambition. Some will misunderstand your kindness. Others will misunderstand your boundaries. No matter what you do, someone will create a version of you that exists only in their imagination. This realization liberates the wise, because they understand something profound. You cannot manage every opinion without losing yourself in the process. Imagine standing before 1,000 mirrors. Each mirror is slightly distorted. One makes you appear taller, another shorter. One stretches your features, another compresses them. Now imagine spending your life trying to correct every reflection, trying to satisfy every distorted image, trying to become whatever each mirror demands. The task would be impossible. Yet this is precisely what many people attempt every day. They shape themselves according to expectations. They modify themselves according to approval. They shrink themselves according to criticism. And little by little, they drift further away from their authentic nature. The Stoics refused this trap. They understood that character matters more than reputation. Because character belongs to you. Reputation belongs to others. Character is within your control. Reputation is not. Character follows you into solitude. Reputation exists only in the minds of strangers. One is real. The other is smoke. Loneliness becomes less painful when you stop demanding that everyone understand you. A strange peace appears when you accept that some people never will. Not because you have failed. Not because they are wrong. But because complete understanding between human beings is rare. Even those closest to us can only glimpse portions of our inner world. There are thoughts that remain unspoken, wounds that remain invisible, dreams that cannot be fully explained. Entire universes exist within every soul. No language can completely bridge the distance. At first this sounds sad, but it is actually beautiful. Because it means there is a sacred depth within you that belongs to no one else. A private sanctuary, an inner kingdom, a place untouched by popularity, criticism, praise, or neglect. Marcus Aurelius spent countless hours cultivating this inner kingdom. Not through escape, not through fantasy, but through discipline. The modern world often misunderstands discipline. It imagines punishment, restriction, harshness, but the Stoics viewed discipline differently. They saw it as a path toward freedom. The disciplined mind is not imprisoned. It is liberated. A person ruled by impulse becomes a servant to every passing emotion. A person ruled by fear becomes a servant to every imagined danger. A person ruled by approval becomes a servant to every opinion. Yet a disciplined mind develops their ability to pause, to observe, to choose. Between stimulus and response, a space appears. And within that space lies freedom. This freedom becomes especially important during lonely seasons, because solitude amplifies whatever already exists inside you. If your mind is chaotic, solitude may feel unbearable. If your mind is resentful, solitude may deepen bitterness. If your mind is fearful, solitude may magnify anxiety. But if your mind has been trained through reflection, patience, and self-awareness, solitude becomes a teacher. The same empty room that torments one person becomes a sanctuary for another. The difference is not the room. The difference is the mind that enters it. This is why Marcus Aurelius worked tirelessly on his own thoughts. Not because he expected perfect control, but because he understood that the quality of life is inseparable from the quality of attention. Where attention goes, experience follows. Focus on what is missing and life appears empty. Focus on what remains and life appears abundant. Focus on insults and life becomes hostile. Focus on opportunities for growth and life becomes meaningful. The world itself changes very little. Perception changes everything. There is an old image often associated with wisdom. An old man sitting alone beneath a tree, watching the horizon, saying very little. Many people look at this image and see loneliness. The wise see something else. They see contentment. The old man is not waiting for entertainment. He is not demanding stimulation. He is not searching desperately for distraction. He has learned to inhabit the present moment fully. The wind is enough. The sky is enough. The sound of distant birds is enough. Existence itself is enough. This lesson becomes increasingly important as the years pass. Because eventually everyone encounters losses that cannot be avoided. People leave. Bodies weaken. Certainties disappear. Entire chapters close forever. And when those moments arrive, external sources of comfort may not be available. You may find yourself walking through dark valleys that nobody else can enter. Grief has such valleys. Aging has such valleys. Illness has such valleys. Regret has such valleys. There are roads each soul must travel alone. No companion can walk them for you. No amount of love can remove them. No amount of wealth can bypass them. And this is precisely why inner strength matters. Not because it prevents suffering, but because it allows you to endure suffering without losing yourself. Marcus Aurelius witnessed war, disease, political intrigue, betrayal, death. Again and again, life presented him with circumstances beyond his control. Yet he continued returning to the same principle. You may not control events. You may control your response. At first glance, this sounds simple. In practice, it is one of the most difficult disciplines imaginable. Because emotions arrive with tremendous force. Fear demands obedience. Anger demands action. Sadness demands surrender. The mind becomes a battlefield. Yet the Stoics insisted that beneath these storms there remains something steady. A deeper self. An observing self. A conscious self capable of choosing its path. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but deliberately. And every time you choose wisdom over impulse, that deeper self grows stronger. Every time you choose patience over reaction, it grows stronger. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, it grows stronger. Every time you choose truth over approval, it grows stronger. Like a muscle strengthened through resistance. Like a tree strengthened through wind. Like a blade sharpened through friction. The soul becomes refined through challenge. This does not make loneliness pleasant. Nor does it eliminate pain. But it transforms both into something meaningful. And meaning changes everything. Pain without meaning feels unbearable. Pain with meaning becomes bearable. Loneliness without meaning feels empty. Loneliness with meaning becomes a path. A path toward self-knowledge. A path toward maturity. A path toward freedom. A path toward the discovery that beneath all the noise, beneath all their expectations, beneath all the fears and ambitions and disappointments, there exists something within you that has been quietly waiting your entire life to be found. Not another person. Not another achievement. Not another destination. You, the stranger who has accompanied you through every moment of your existence. The witness behind every memory. The silent observer behind every triumph and every wound. You have carried this presence since childhood, yet most people spend astonishingly little time becoming acquainted with it. They know the preferences of celebrities. They know their opinions of politicians. They know the lives of neighbors. They know the stories of strangers scattered across the world. Yet the one person they cannot escape, the one person who will remain until their final breath, remains largely unexplored. And so a curious tragedy unfolds. A person may become surrounded by companions and still feel alone. Because no amount of external company can compensate for inner estrangement. You can sit at a crowded table and feel isolated. You can stand before an audience and feel invisible. You can share a home and still experience profound loneliness. Because loneliness is not always the absence of people. Often it is the absence of connection with your own soul. Marcus Aurelius understood this with unusual clarity. He knew that the human being who cannot live peacefully with himself will eventually struggle to live peacefully with anyone else. The conflict merely changes location. An unsettled mind carries its unrest everywhere. A fearful heart carries its fears into every relationship. An empty spirit tries to extract fulfillment from people who were never meant to provide it. And so disappointment repeats itself. Again, and again, and again, until eventually a deeper question emerges. What if no one is coming to complete me? What if that has never been the purpose of another human being? The question feels unsettling at first. Yet hidden inside it is extraordinary freedom. Because if no one is responsible for completing you, then your wholeness no longer depends upon their arrival. It already exists as a possibility within you. Like a seed waiting beneath the soil. Like a fire waiting beneath the ashes. Like a hidden spring beneath dry ground. The Stoics often spoke of living according to nature. Many misunderstand this phrase. They imagine forests, rivers, mountains, and stars. And certainly nature includes these things. But it also includes human nature. The reality of what we are. We are temporary creatures living in a temporary world. We are vulnerable, mortal, imperfect. We experience loss. We experience uncertainty. We experience change. To resist these realities is to resist life itself. A bird does not complain that it must someday die. A tree does not resent the coming of autumn. The stars do not protest the night. Nature accepts its cycles. Yet human beings often spend years fighting theirs. They resent aging. They resent endings. They resent impermanence. And in doing so, they multiply suffering. The loneliness many people fear is often connected to this resistance. They fear being left behind, forgot, unneeded, unseen. But beneath these fears lies a deeper terror. The fear that their value depends entirely upon their usefulness to others. The fear that without constant attention they cease to matter. Marcus Aurelius would have challenged this belief immediately. A diamond remains valuable in darkness. A mountain remains magnificent whether observed or ignored. The sun continues to shine whether praised or criticized. Why should your worth depend upon witnesses? Why should your value require applause? What if your existence possesses inherent dignity? What if being alive is enough reason to matter? What if the soul does not need constant validation to justify its presence? These questions seem simple, yet they have the power to transform an entire life. Because the person who truly understands them stops living as a beggar. No longer begging for approval. No longer begging for recognition. No longer begging for permission to exist authentically. Instead, they begin living from a place of quiet sovereignty. Not arrogance, not superiority, simply self-possession. They know who they are, or at least they are committed to discovering it. And that commitment changes everything. The years begin to look different. Success looks different. Failure looks different. Relationships look different. Even loneliness looks different. What once felt like abandonment begins to resemble solitude. What once felt like emptiness begins to resemble space. What once felt like punishment begins to resemble preparation. Consider the ocean. On the surface, Storms rage. Waves crash. Winds howl. Chaos appears everywhere. Yet far beneath the surface, an extraordinary stillness remains. The deeper waters are not disturbed by every passing storm. Human beings possess this same depth. Most people live exclusively at the surface. Every criticism becomes a hurricane. Every disappointment becomes a catastrophe. Every rejection becomes an identity. Every setback becomes evidence of personal failure. They are tossed endlessly by emotional weather. The Stoics sought something deeper. They sought the waters beneath the storm. The place within themselves untouched by circumstance. Not untouched by pains. Pain is inevitable. But untouched by panic. Untouched by despair. Untouched by the illusion that external events determine inner worth. This depth becomes especially valuable in moments of isolation. Because eventually life strips away distractions. Eventually the phone stops ringing. Eventually the room becomes quiet. Eventually the crowd moves on. And when that moment arrives, you meet whatever has been waiting beneath the surface all along. For some, the encounter is frightening. For others, it is liberating. The difference depends upon whether they spent their years cultivating an inner life. Marcus Aurelius cultivated his relentlessly, not because he expected the world to become easier, but because he knew it would remain difficult. The purpose of wisdom was never to eliminate challenge. The purpose of wisdom was to prepare the soul to face challenge with dignity. This distinction matters. Many people seek philosophies that promise comfort. The Stoics offered something more valuable. Clarity. Comfort disappears when circumstances change. Clarity remains. Comfort depends upon conditions. Clarity transcends them. Comfort can be taken away. Clarity becomes part of who you are. And clarity reveals a truth that many spend lifetimes avoiding. You do not own tomorrow. You do not own next year. You do not own the future you imagine. You possess only this moment, this breath, this opportunity to act with integrity, this chance to live according to your values, this brief window between birth and death. Once this becomes real not intellectually, but deeply, their obsession with external validation begins to fade. Why waste precious years managing impressions? Why sacrifice authenticity for approval? Why surrender peace to people who are themselves struggling to understand life? Every person you meet is carrying invisible burdens. Every person is wrestling with fears. Every person is moving toward the same destination. The grave equalizes kings and laborers. The passage of time humbles the proud and the powerful alike. Soon enough, every voice grows silent. Every reputation fades. Every audience disappears. What remains then? Only the quality of how you lived. Only the condition of your character. Only the courage with which you faced reality. Only the love you offered. Only the truth you honored. Only the wisdom you cultivated. Everything else dissolves. This realization can feel sobering. Yet it is strangely comforting. Because it simplifies life. You no longer need to carry impossible expectations. You no longer need to impress everyone. You no longer need to become 100 different versions of yourself to satisfy 100 different observers. You can simply become yourself. Fully, honestly, courageously. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson Marcus Aurelius understood about loneliness. Loneliness is not the enemy. Forgetfulness is the enemy. Forgetting who you are. Forgetting what matters. Forgetting the temporary nature of all things. Forgetting the strength that already exists within you. The crowd can help you forget. Noise can help you forget. Distraction can help you forget. But solitude has a remarkable habit of reminding. It strips away illusions. It removes masks. It reveals foundations. And if you remain with it long enough without fleeing, without numbing, without hiding, you eventually discover something extraordinary. You were never as alone as you thought. Because beneath the changing circumstances of life, beneath the arrivals and departures, Beneath the victories and defeats, beneath the applause and the criticism, there has always been a companion walking beside you. Your own conscious spirit. Patient, steady, waiting, not demanding perfection, not demanding greatness, only asking to be acknowledged, to be heard, to be known. And when at last you learn to sit peacefully in your own presence, something profound occurs. The fear begins to dissolve. The hunger for validation begins to soften. The endless need for noise begins to quiet. The loneliness that once felt like a prison becomes a sanctuary. The silence that once felt empty becomes sacred. The solitude that once frightened you becomes a source of strength. And there in that stillness, beyond the reach of public opinion, beyond the demands of the crowd, beyond the restless pursuit of approval, you finally encounter a freedom that cannot be granted by the world and cannot be taken away by it. A freedom Marcus Aurelius carried through war, uncertainty, grief, responsibility, and loss. A freedom available to every human being willing to turn inward and meet themselves honestly. The freedom of needing nothing outside yourself to confirm what your soul already knows. That you are enough. That this moment is enough. And that within the quiet depths of your own being lies a peace more enduring than praise, more reliable than circumstance, and more faithful than any companion time could ever provide.